The war in Ukraine has now gone on longer than World War I, and that milestone, as staggering as it sounds, tells us a great deal about the kind of conflict this has become. On Thursday, the war crossed 1,569 days. That's more than 4 years and 3 months, officially outlasting the First World War. When Vladimir Putin sent Russian troops into Ukraine in February 2022, he expected the country to fall within days. Even many of the soldiers fighting on the ground couldn't imagine it would last this long. One Ukrainian soldier, who goes by the call sign France, a nod to his time in the French Foreign Legion, said he figured politicians would find some consensus after 2 or 3 years. That hasn't happened. Peace talks are stalled, and polls suggest about half of Ukrainians believe the war won't end before next year. That would push it closer to another grim threshold, the 6-year duration of World War II. And some Ukrainians would argue the war really started back in 2014, when Russia seized Crimea. Historians are careful to note the limits of the comparison. World War I was a global conflict fought across multiple theaters, involving armies from dozens of nations. Ukraine didn't even exist as a country back then. But the parallels are hard to ignore. Both wars began with a rapid offensive that came close to its target, Paris in 1914, Kiev in 2022, and both were ultimately repelled. Both then settled into grinding, largely static fighting along a frozen front line. Michel Goya, a former French colonel and military historian, put it plainly: in many respects, this war in Ukraine is the one that most closely resembles World War I. Ukrainian and Russian troops have at times been separated by just a few hundred yards, close enough to see one another. Assaults still follow the same brutal formula: artillery barrages to pin down the enemy, then infantry squads storming the trenches. The scale of destruction looks hauntingly familiar too. Drone footage from the front shows splintered trees, ruined buildings, and fields cratered by shells, scenes that could have been pulled from the Western Front a century ago. But the war has evolved in ways that would have been unimaginable in 1914. Drones in the air, at sea, and on land have fundamentally transformed the battlefield. Open trench networks, once the defining image of World War I, are now death traps. Any movement is instantly spotted and struck. Soldiers have had to go smaller and deeper, sheltering in tiny fortified dugouts built to withstand explosive shockwaves. Tanks, first introduced in 1916, have largely been sidelined; they're simply too visible from the sky. The large-scale infantry assaults of a century ago have been replaced by attacks carried out by just 1 or 2 soldiers at a time. NATO's Supreme Allied Commander for Transformation, Admiral Pierre Vandier, visited Ukraine this spring and concluded that drones have made the battlefield lethal at levels comparable to World War I. The numbers bear that out in a different way too. Russia's advance on the eastern city of Pokrovsk, which it recently captured, moved at an average of roughly 75 yards per day. That's slower than some of the most deadlocked offensives of the Battle of the Somme. So can the deadlock be broken? Ukraine's strategy carries echoes of how the Allies finally won in 1918, combining economic pressure with military attrition. Drone strikes on Russian oil infrastructure are designed to squeeze Moscow's ability to fund the war, while waves of small attack drones aim to inflict losses the Russian army can't sustain. As Ukrainian historian Yaroslav Hrytsak summed it up, this is World War I, but with drones. For years in, with no end in sight, the war in Ukraine has earned its place among the most consequential conflicts in modern European history, and it is still being written.